And welcome to the Barry Foster Show, now on YouTube, originating from the Ridge Floor Studios in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. I'd like to remind you, if you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for our program, guests you'd like us to interview, or topics you'd like us to broach, just either drop us a line at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com or leave a comment right below so we can get back to you, and the almighty algorithm will see we're corresponding with our listeners, okay? Check out this page at the Barry Foster Show daily here on YouTube, as we'll be putting up new programming on a regular basis. And please like and subscribe our page, and join our pages at the Barry Foster Show on Facebook and Instagram. That would be very helpful. In the Ridge Floor Studios this morning, good to have John Larsen back with us. John,
good morning.
Yeah, you know, today,
Monday morning.
This is Monday morning, and
right.
The day you'll be hearing this will be the 15th and Tuesday, and the County Commission is going to have a budget workshop on Tuesday. Last week, we went to a budget presentation with Highlands County Commissioner Don Elwell, who was, let's use the word disappointed. He was disappointed at the turnout of the people to comment and talk about the budget. I do have a call in, and perhaps by the end of today's program, we'll be able to find out. I have a text into Highlands County Administrator Lori Herner asking, is the proposed 25-26 budget on the web anywhere for people to look at? And so far as I know, the answer is no. Mm-hmm. And it's a little hard to comment on a budget if you don't know what's in it. You know, it's like right. What was Nancy Pelosi says, we have to pass it to find out what's in it.
Right.
You know, so I'm very disappointed that, at this budget presentation, I had a few questions, general overall questions about, we know that there's going to be budget charges this year, and so my question now is, are there going to be offsets? Are you going to try to find out ways to not do some things to help pay for the other things that you're going to do? And there was a lot of furtive glances, but nobody said anything. So it's going to be interesting to me to see who shows up. I would urge you to go, and I would urge you to ask the commissioners, and I might even have a chance to go on Tuesday morning and ask the commission why the proposed budget is not up for citizens to look at if you're asking for citizen involvement.
Right, and that's at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes.
By the way. 9 o'clock is
it'll
when
be Tuesday
starts.
morning. It'll be the day you hear this.
Yeah,
It'll be this
so
morning.
It'll be at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning down at the Government Center, and there'll be an opportunity for people like myself to kind of hear what they have to say money-wise. You're right, because even Elwell, I think, mentioned at the meeting last Tuesday that the budget information wasn't online yet.
No.
And so on. So that's whether that's still true today, which is just about a week later. It'll be a week tomorrow, so we'll find out.
It should be public record. I mean, you should see, this is proposed, and they send us the trim millage, the trim notice that says, they said at the maximum amount, this is what we're going to charge you. They can always come down. They can't go up. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, that when you find out that they're going to charge you some horrible amount, it sparks discussion when that arrives. And so you have a chance to do that. But I think it's rather disingenuous to expect people to talk about something that they have not seen.
Right. I mean, if you want to question a specific item and the dollar amount associated with that item, and it's not available to you, then what are you going to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, you get 3 to 5 minutes,
right.
somewhere in there.
Right.
So let's say I want to talk about the roads, the paving of the roads. Mm-hmm. Well, how much is in the paving of the roads? Well, it's this much. Well, which roads are you going to pave? Well, there's this. And it's, and by the time you get to the end of the third or fourth question, I'm sorry, sir, your time is up. Mm-hmm. You'll have to look at it. Well, I can't look at it. I would love to look at it.
Right.
I would love to spend some quality time over my computer in the budget looking at the thing that really interests me. I'd like to find out, from me personally, I'd like to find out what they're spending on the Economic Development Division and why they don't let that go back into the public sector again, and call upon the people who are going to benefit from this, the bankers and the real estate people and the people who are going to get benefit from new business coming in. And in fact, I have this now that Florida is now ranked number 3rd in business in the nation, and it's one of the top destinations for new business according to the Florida Council of 100. So we stand by being in Florida to benefit from that. But I want to find out, but you don't know how much, you can find out how much they spent last year. You can look at last year's budget and find out what it is and what they did. Another thing I'd like to know is what are they spending on parks and recreation? And I'd like to know, have they done a cost-benefit analysis to decide which parks are serving people well, which parks have people there all the time? And the one that keeps getting brought up is the one on 98 out toward Loretta, where when you go out there, it is just perfectly groomed. It's wonderful. You couldn't ask for a better park. There's never anybody there,
Right.
except you. But you have your choice of the picnic tables, and you can go out in the walkway and be undisturbed by people, and maybe once in a while somebody else will come out and launch a boat. But I mean, there's not much. And so, have they done any cost-benefit analysis to find out, are we wasting our time on this? I mean, how many people come out if you find out that you get 10 people in a month, 20 people in a month? That's less than one a day. You get 30 people in a month. That's one a day. Is that enough to justify it? But once they build something, they don't seem to go back and revisit to find out whether that was a good idea or not.
Right. Well, we've seen that in other situations, and that was the field that they put in an access road and that down there, also on 98, I believe it was.
Yes.
And whatnot to grow. What was it?
Egress.
Egress. That's
They
right.
were gonna. They put in an all $900. Was it $900,000? They put in a turn lane to go to this new promised. They were going to grow grass that they were going to be making into ethanol, and they've had 3 suitors since then. BP was one of them. U.S. Energy was another one. I can't remember the third one. But at any rate, they went and they spent no small amount of time, money, and effort doing this, and it turned out to be nothing. You know, so it's going to be. I would like them to do a little more due diligence when it comes to budget time, even if they have to. I would think that they could find some people in the private sector who would be glad to do those kinds of reports, what they call an ad hoc committee, where they go out and they gather information and bring it back to the commission and says, you know, do with this what you want, but here's the information. I think that there are agencies in the county now that have the ability to put video monitoring out there, and then you can put it on, you know, triple speed and watch, and all of a sudden when you start seeing movement, you stop it there and say, is that a jackrabbit or is that a fisherman? You know,
Right.
What's
Yep.
out there? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, the times that I remember going down there, and we probably stopped there, I'm going to say at least over the years, a dozen times, dozen and a half times. The only people I saw there were fishermen. There were a couple trucks with trailers. They had put their boat in the water. They were out fishing and so on. So that was the only activity that we saw when we were there. But you're right. It was a nice situation, nice location. It appeared to be well taken care of, and so on. So if it's really worthwhile, should they do more to try to publicize the availability of that park for people?
Or have functions out there.
Yeah, do something to kind of, you know, spruce it up a little bit and bring attention to people that, hey, it's here, it's for you, it's paid for by you.
Yeah.
You know, this is what you can do down here, and you're right, have some activities down there that draw attention to that park.
Your tax dollars at work.
Absolutely, and I think that would be a good idea. You know, there's items that they could do down there, so we'll see.
Another thing that Commissioner Elwell pointed out was that and I have heard this for decades. I started in 1986 as the news director at WWOJ. I grew I'd prayed about this, and the Lord answered my prayers. The station kind of grew up under me. I went from one station, which was WWOJ, to 2 stations, which was WWOJ and WWTK, and then they had 3 more stations on, so I became the news director for the entire Highlands radio group. And I've watched this over the years where the county officials have pleaded with people to come and be on committees. These committees have openings. We need your input. We need you to help us. And when you said you were going to apply, I watched with great interest because I've applied for that same committee. You went and talked to Ingrid Gardner about being on which committee now?
I thought it was like a homeless committee, but that's only a small part of it. It's more like affordable housing.
The Affordable Housing Committee.
Right.
Yes.
Affordable Housing Committee and whatnot. So, and my concern was I've always asked myself about homelessness. Why do we have homelessness, and what can we do about it? Because you read about it, it seems to be getting in some parts of the country bigger and bigger, and there are so many reasons why people end up homeless. All right. Some people actually want to be homeless.
Yes.
They don't want to be in a structured environment or a home, if you will. So that was my question, and I wanted to learn myself. I wanted to learn, all right, why do people become homeless, and what are we, the populace in Highlands County, doing about it? But I guess from what I understood in talking with her Friday, that there are certain requirements that are required of someone who applies. And evidently, I didn't have that requirement, so it wasn't going to be a fit for me. And that's the way it goes. I have no problem with it, but when one person says we need people, and then you try to be one of those people, and then it's not available for whatever reason.
Back in the olden days, when J.D. Barrett and Jerry Canale were on the commission, I applied because they had a big thing for the Affordable Housing Committee, and I applied to be on the Affordable Housing Committee. And I found out that at that time, the 11 people, only 2 of them were like regular citizens. Were like you and me, like garden variety, Joe Blow, citizen who might have interest in this. Otherwise, you had to be a banker who would lend money for housing, or you had to be an architect or a builder who would design or build housing, or you would have to be a former member of a housing development, so you kind of knew the way housing development works. You had these requirements, and these committees were all designed to encourage affordable housing, not people who would question things. These were people who had a vested interest in seeing more of it.
Right.
You know, and I at the time I questioned that. I said, well, suppose both of us, average Joe citizens, vote against this thing that you want to do. Well, it'll be a 9-2 vote then.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So they put me up, and I was nominated. I was not accepted by a 3-2 margin. You know. So when we talked about the affordable housing, but I don't see much point in being the average Joe Blow citizen kind of questioning people who have a vested interest. Of course, you think bankers want to see more affordable housing for loans? You think builders want to see more affordable housing to put up buildings? You think people who used to live in them want to see more of that and better conditions than they had? I had a dear friend, Clint McVicker, who's no longer living here. He's living out on the coast now. But at the time, he was a landlord, and they were going to put in this big new affordable housing. And he came up before him, and he said, "Look, you're killing me." He says, "I rent houses, all right, and I try to keep them nice. I work on them, we mow the lawns. If there's plumbing repairs, some other, kind of repair, we go in and fix it for them." He says, "But here you are, using my tax dollars, okay, to build this huge new affordable housing complex with a community center there and a pool and education stuff for the kids to learn how to garden. And I mean, you're putting up this whole planned community using my tax dollars. And do you think I can compete with that? I can't compete with that." And the commission at the time, I would love to name names. I'm not going to name any names. But they basically said in the nicest possible way, "Sorry." And they went ahead and approved it. In fact, they approved it 4-0 to 1 abstention because one of the commissioners had a relative who might possibly be benefiting from this government project. And we complained roundly, and we were told, "Well, there's elections. If you don't like us, get us out." And they've all left now. I believe there's none of them left on the commission now. But when they have these committees, the Tourist Development Commission is much the same way. You have to stand to be able to benefit from tourism to be on that committee. So when they put out this list of, I can't remember, it was 8 or 10 different committees, look into them, because there's a real good chance that although you want to help, you are not allowed to help.
Right. Well, the other thing, the idea that I had, because I've tried to see a lot of stories around the country, because homelessness is not as big an issue here in Highlands County. It is in some of the major cities. Oh my gosh, you take L.A., Chicago, they're in New York. There's so many locations. But some people on their own, I read a story here a while back about a fella who evidently has the wherewithal, and he was putting together 100 little modular homes, tiny homes, I guess you call them, and had the land to put these on for homelessness. I think it was in California. And he did that as an individual, not government. As an individual, he was touched by the fact that he wanted to help homeless people. And this is what he did. But you can see today, and there's a lot of them advertised on the YouTube and so on, how good they are. I can't say for that, but they're small, tiny homes, modular units that you can put in that are good for possibly just one person. Okay, and so is it a wise idea to get a piece of property, and surely within the county, there's got to be a location where they could put homelessness situation up, and find the wherewithal financially to get these modular homes, these tiny homes, if you will, and be able to take, I don't know, what the county population of homeless is. Is it 100? Is it 150? Whatever that. You may not be able to put up modular homes, tiny homes for everybody, but at least you might be able to help those that are in need the most and get them off the street.
Well, every year at the beginning of the year in January, there is a survey done trying to find people, and they send people out to where there are homeless encampments. And I remember one famous story of this guy that came out, a bunch of them came out, and they were saying, well, we're trying to survey the homeless. And he got very angry. And he said, we're not homeless. This is where we live. We have tents, and just because we don't have a mailbox and are paying property tax doesn't mean we're homeless. We're all encamped here, and we're having a good time, and you can leave us alone. We don't want anything from you.
Right.
We are not homeless, and they objected strenuously to the homeless moniker being attached to them. As we've talked about on the radio talk show back in the olden days, there are many people who are living, as they say, on the streets because they have mental problems or drug problems.
Right, absolutely, and that's the other. There's a big part to that, because you certainly have to, if you establish a location and a site where you can bring homeless people in, you have to have restrictions. Otherwise, it's going to turn into be another homeless encampment. Is what it's going to be. So you have to have restrictions about the use of drug and alcohol. Okay, you have to have some policing, whether it's outside policing or policing on its own and whatnot. But just the idea of being homeless is, what are the sanitary conditions for these folks? And that's why I'm saying in a structured environment where you have, let's say, tiny homes and an encampment, they would have then use of sanitary facilities, which has got to be a concern. I don't care who you are, not only for the environment, but for the people themselves.
Well, they make ways for themselves. There is I don't want to be too specific about this. My wife is involved in cat rescue, and so one of our friends is a woman who's the TNR person, trap, neuter, and release, so that they don't make more cats. Okay, and she was in a wooded area near a government facility where there had been reports of all these cats. So she went out there and she was accosted is not exactly the word. She was rather confronted by this guy who lived out there, and those were his cats. And she explained to him, "Look, we're gonna make sure that they don't get, they don't make more cats." And some bad things that happened. She says, and she rather made friends with him. They saw eye to eye on the cats, and so she had gone in there and trapped cats. In fact, he'd been able to kind of corral some of them for her, and she took them out of town, got them fixed, and brought them back and let them go again. But he was very happy where he was.
Yeah,
he was very. And there was a well-known guy in Sebring back in the late 1990s and early 2000s that you would see walking around, and he would stay one of two places generally. He would there was a McDonald's and a Burger King right across the street, just south of town, and he lived in a wooded, brushed area that he hollowed out right underneath the "Welcome to Sebring" sign, and he lived back in there. And McDonald's and Burger King would each give him a little bit of food and a drink, and he would sit in the back and read books. He would go down to Linda's Books, and she would give him books to read. He'd read them and bring them back. It was kind of like a library, kind of. And sadly, he got hit by a car going across 27. But he was very happy where he lived back in there. And as it turned out, he was apparently a Vietnam veteran who had, back in World War I, they call it shell shock. He had problems, and so he just rather kept to himself, and people would come over and talk to him. He'd talk to him, but mostly he read. And I don't know if you classify that as a mental illness, but they were very happy. I don't think he would have gone to a structured community as you speak of.
And there's a percentage of people that will not, and we've seen that almost forever when it comes to the homeless situation. There are folks who are very happy living in the woods, if you will, and so on. And those folks, I think, you can't pressure people into doing something you don't want to do. So if you run across someone like that, you would have to say, okay, thank you very much. We understand that you're not interested in a structured environment. We'll go on to the next person who may be amenable to the structured environment and whatnot. But somehow you kind of got to get, folks and give them an opportunity to live in I call it a structured environment, but give them that opportunity, get off the street, get out of the woods. There was for years, going back 4 or 5 years ago, there was a fairly decent encampment where across the street from all these, where they've now built the new VA building.
Yes.
And the sheriff, I know, went in there, I want to say 3-4 years ago, and cleaned out everybody that was there and moved them, I don't know where, okay? But that doesn't do any good if what you do is shuffle the folks from point A now to point B, then to point C. That doesn't solve the problem. You still have the homelessness. Maybe all of those people that they came across did not want to be in anything. They wanted to live in the woods or in some other location, but on their own. And that may be all well and good. I mean, like I say, you just can't, unless they're creating a problem for someone else, if that's their desire and they want to live that way, then I think you just have to let them be.
Well, there are some organizations, private sector organizations, that help. And our buddy Fred Norton over at the Vietnam Veterans Hall, he and I had quite a candid conversation about at least one group of Vietnam vets who live out in the woods with each other and have their own community. And he says other people had found them and brought them food, and the next day they came back and they were gone. They were gone. He says, we, the Vietnam vets, we're about the only group that can actually help them because we share this history. We understand each other, and they'll let us, they'll say, what do you need? We'll bring them what they need. We don't bring them anything they don't need or anything that they don't want. And so he said, but I'll use the term, he didn't use this term, I'll use it. Normal people, you and me, we go back and we see that there's a group of, pick a number, 24 homeless guys. You go in there, and they want nothing to do with anybody except each other. And then the next day, you've more or less forced them to move because you, quote unquote, discovered them.
Right.
So there are people who can go back in, and my understanding is that also I knew one of the guys that did the homeless survey, which begins in January. Interestingly, at the same time as the bird count goes on. But at any rate, they had to have somebody who spoke Spanish because there were large encampments of illegals who were camped out in the woods, staying away from the federales. And I would say nowadays that's going to be even more of a thing.
Oh yeah.
And they would go to find out what they needed because they were afraid that you were with the police to round them up.
Well, that is that really takes into a lot of consideration of what's going on today. Again, and these are not homeless people as much as although what they might do is have an apartment or a small house that has 25 people in it.
Yes.
Okay, because for whatever reason, and that's what they want, or that's their condition, and so on. So that's become a very big thing. Just saw a clip of it this morning. Tom Holman was speaking at a Turning Point meeting, I think this past weekend, and he was confronted in the audience by someone who was, you're rounding up by everybody, not just MS-13 people, blah, blah, blah. And Tom Holman said, look, he stopped and he said, look, you want to talk? Come up here. Come up here right now and talk. He said, otherwise, get your out of here. And the guy ended up, I think, leaving. And he said, goodbye, loser. Okay, he let him have it, all right?
Well,
because they're getting confronted, his people are getting confronted all across the country. And some of it, in the video that I watched this weekend, the guy that was firing at the agents that were trying to round up illegals.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And this, you knew and we've got so many people, especially, I'll say it on the Democratic side, who are rabble-rousers. And they really stir the pot and create so much of this friction and whatnot that's going on. There was another story that it happened a while ago, but just now, yesterday, I see that she was, I think, arrested or charged, at least charged, a city councilwoman from Worcester, Massachusetts.
Yes.
And whatnot. She battered some of the ICE officers that were there to get this woman, but this woman was guilty of a major crime. All right, she used a gun on a pregnant woman, okay, and whatnot. So it was a serious situation, and all right, look, we're here to round up the people that have committed crimes. They're here illegally, number one. They also committed a crime.
Well, they committed a crime when they came across the border illegally.
Yes.
Number one. But people have been criminal illegal immigrants who have gone above and beyond that.
Right.
And we've seen this when they don't get their way, or they're afraid that their little situation is going to be disrupted. It happened right here in the city of Charm 30 years ago when Tom Macklin was the mayor, and they had the Illegal Immigrant Relief Act, and they were going to impose sanctions on people who didn't have E-Verify and had people working who might be illegal. They bust people in here. They bust people in here to cause huge chaos of things that were going on. And there was an effort to go in and have home inspections, because after some of the houses, after harvesting season was over, they go in some of the houses and there were bunk beds all around in the living room, the bedroom, the dining room. There was a guy sleeping in the bathtub, for crying out loud, and they had 20 or 30 guys in a home made for 6. And in fact, the mayor was watching one morning, and the guy who he referred to as a slumlord was trying to get him banned, but he says, I'm on the sidewalk. That's public property. You cannot ban me from the sidewalk. And there was an effort by then city manager C.B. Shirey to get some changes in the way that migrant camps were zoned to keep them out of residential property, because it said that 6 people had to be related. And all of a sudden, well, this is my son, and this is my uncle, and this is my brother, and this is my so-and-so. And by the time they sorted it all out, harvesting season was over and they'd moved out. So the city of Avon Park tried to take care of it, but members of the deep state would not help, okay? And there was it was a 3-2 vote, and one council person changed their vote, and there were some questions about why that happened.
Well, the other thing this weekend, of course, one of the big stories was the ICE raid on a marijuana crop growing operation in California using children.
200 people.
Using children,
yeah.
All right, for labor, child labor. All right, number one, which is illegal in itself. Number two, a lot of the people working there were illegals to begin with. And unfortunately, one of the fellows, I think he was 57 years old, this story I read, climbed up on top of a greenhouse, all right, to try and evade capture by ICE and whatnot. Unfortunately for him, he fell off the greenhouse, broke his neck, and died.
That didn't go well. I mean, greenhouses are not made for people to be on top.
No, but if you read the story, it says, man dies during ICE raid. Well, the story makes it look like the ICE people. No, the unfortunate story is the fella fell off the greenhouse and broke his neck and died. That had nothing to do with ice. He was trying to avoid capture and whatnot, and unfortunately for him, the end result wasn't good.
No, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is now certified to help ICE but under this 287G program, and they've been working on this since February. And their intent, again, is to remove criminal illegals. And I would imagine that when you cast the net, you get more than tuna. Okay,
right.
And so I would say when they cast the net, more than criminals show up. And you see these errant stories, and I think there's many, many more than this, of people they feel afraid, and so they are self-deporting. And I saw some horrible statistic. If you had to replicate as many people as Biden let in during the Biden administration, you'd have to get rid of 250,000 people a month.
Right.
A month.
Right.
Just to catch up with what was let in.
Right.
So it's a ponderous task.
Oh yeah, there's no way in, let's say, the 4 years of the Trump administration, there's no way they're going to get rid of all the people that Biden let into the country. That's not going to happen, not physically going to happen. The other thing, with all of these protests that are taking place, it slows down, and this is probably part of their method. Yes. It slows down the process of capturing these people and then either deporting them or putting them in jail, whatever the situation ends up being. So their tactic of all these protests, and by the way, most of those people are paid protesters. There was a story this weekend, I saw this woman, she was identified as being a protester at like 30 or 40 of these things in different states, different locales. She was just her full-time job was a protester. And so she'd protest here. When this story was over, she went over there and protested over there. So you have people that create this and are doing this not because they either have strong feelings about the circumstance, they're doing it because they want money in their pocket.
There's a kid on YouTube, there's a couple of guys now, who go to these protests, take pictures, look at the pictures and compare the people that are in there. And this one kid, he's a bright kid. He says, for every 100 subscribers, I'll unveil another one. And you usually work in pairs. And he had this one woman, and she was protesting for Iran, I think, or Palestine, one of the Middle Eastern countries.
Yep.
And he says, well, where do you work? She says, I don't. He says, you don't work? He says, no, I don't have to. And then he went into it and said, well, the reason she doesn't have to is she's a paid protester, and they pay for her to go places. They give her per diem, room and board. They give her what she needs. She goes out, riles up the crowd, and there's he doesn't have names for some of them. He calls the one the babushka lady because she's always wearing a babushka, which is a scarf, a big scarf. And there's one lady that always wears her sunglasses. Here she is with her sunglasses. Here she is without her sunglasses. Here's the babushka lady right next to her. They go out in pairs and they do this stuff. And I don't know where the money comes from. I have a sneaking suspicion, where the money is coming from. And I think that two things are happening, and I don't know if it'll happen quickly enough. With the cutoff of U.S. aid and some of these other things that DOJ has found, some of their monetary stream has dried up.
Yes.
So now they're having to use their own money and money by very, very rich people who would like to see the downfall of the United States.
Absolutely.
So how long does it take it for them to find it not fiscally feasible to do this anymore?
Well, that's the big question.
That's a $64,000 question.
And the other thing is, the Trump administration, what gets me, Joe Biden brought in upwards of 10 to 20 million people.
Yes.
There were practically no protests during that whole 4 years of him doing that. No protest. Nobody went. I don't remember anybody going to court to try and stop it.
No.
But what happened the minute the Trump administration said, okay, we're going to start rounding people up, court case after court case after court case, protest after protest after protest. And so this And they have to take a look at it and say, okay, what's the benefit of these people that are protesting? And I think you hit on it a little earlier when you said the downfall of the country.
Yes.
I think definitely, there's our local.
Yeah.
A little early today, 11:30.
Ahead of schedule. That's what we like to see.
On time, yes, and whatnot. But so I think that, they're going to have Tom Holman specifically, Kristi Noem, President Trump, and the rest of the people, ICE agents and all. They're going to have a tough battle, but I think they've got to continue to do what they're doing, because somehow we've got to get rid of as many criminals in this country that Joe Biden let in out of this country. Because take a look at how many people have been murdered, how many women have been raped, how many cars have been stolen, how many people have been injured by illegals that are driving on the road with either no license or inebriated, if you will,
yeah,
and so on. So all of that, you take that into consideration. To me, that's much more important than people out there protesting to try and stop something that they all know that they broke the law to begin with, but supposedly that doesn't matter. It's
the Cloward-Piven theory, which is to overwhelm the system. And when they came in, Biden was throwing veterans out of their digs in hotels to put in the illegals.
Yes.
He was they were putting up in luxury apartments and giving them everything they wanted and more to try to spend us into bankruptcy. And so it's going to take a while to undo. But, and that's why the protest is, because they are trying to keep the gains that they got. Mm-hmm. And they'll try to keep every last one that they can get their hands on. And that's why I think it's up to us to look for truth, justice, and the American way.
Remember, one big thing that Biden also did, he put into place, he did a census in 2020. What they did now, they count not registered people or citizens, they count illegals also.
Yes.
In districts. So if your district gained, let's say, 1,000 people, and now that 1,000 people put you on the other side of the fence, you now have a big step up. So that was one of the big things. And we said right along, I think from the outset, when this whole thing started, all they're trying to do is gain voters.
Yes.
And essentially that's exactly what they did.
This is not ahistorical, because this has happened in the past.
Oh, yeah.
As you well remember, and I will remember from our teachings in school, there was a big complaint in the South that they had more people than were being counted. You and I would have referred to them as slaves. Mm-hmm. And so the Northerners said, well, they're not really citizens. They don't really count. And they said, oh, well, they're people, they count. And that they came to the idea that for the purposes of the census, that slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person. So that they would be counted as people, but not people who voted.
Right.
And so the South then would gain House seats. They would gain. There weren't any kind of government aid back then. There were not the grant programs that we have today, but they did that to bump up their census to get more people from the South into Congress. So this has happened in the past. Mm-hmm. This has happened in the past, and the question is, do we want to treat illegals like slaves? That's, I think, a good question.
Well, I always, and I'll never forget what Rush Limbaugh said.
Oh, yes.
For years and years and years. He said, I don't mind how many people they bring in. However, they cannot vote for 25 years. That was his plan. You can bring them in. They can't vote for 25 years.
Well, there's a lot of people who spend a lot of money to become citizens, okay?
Oh, yeah.
That really object to that idea.
Right.
They said, look what we had to go through.
Yeah, he was talking, though, about illegal immigrants.
I understand.
What we have today. The illegals he had, but for every illegal, he said, you can bring them into the country. I don't care how many. They can't vote for 25 years. Well, but when they changed that, so if they're in the country, in a district, they are counted as a voter, okay, as a person. So that really skews the whole system right there.
Well, we're out of time today. We haven't talked about Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi. We haven't talked about Alligator Alcatraz. I mean, there's a lot, but you know what? There's always tomorrow.
Always tomorrow.
Always tomorrow. So
Good Lord willing.
Yes, don't go away. There's more to come. You've been listening to the latest edition of the Barry Foster Show at the Ridge Floor Studios, located in the City of Charm, beautiful downtown Avon Park. If you have thoughts, ideas, or suggestions for our program, just drop us a line at thebarryfostershow@gmail.com or put your comments down below. Please like and share with a friend, and come to our Barry Foster Show pages at Facebook and Instagram. That would be very helpful as we continue to look for truth, justice, and the American way. This is Barry Foster and John Larsen, and we'll see you next time.